March 12, 1944, Southampton, England. The morning fog hung heavy over the dockyards when Royal Engineers Bomb Disposal Unit 17 received the call that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. A German SC-1000 Hermann high-explosive bomb had punched through 3 floors of a textile factory near the waterfront during the previous night's raid and buried itself in the basement, but it hadn't detonated. Now it sat there, silent and patient, beneath 23 workers who had no idea they were standing on top of nearly 1,000 kilograms of Amatol explosive. Lieutenant James Hartley was 26 years old, though his hands shook like those of a man twice his age. He had defused 17 bombs in the past 4 months. Each time he told himself it would be the last. Each time the phone rang again. The factory basement smelled of oil and damp concrete. Water dripped somewhere in the darkness. Hartley's team set up arc lights that cast harsh shadows across the crater where the bomb had come to rest. The SC-1000 was massive, nearly 2 meters long, its dull gray casing still warm from the friction of its fall. The tail fins were crumpled but recognizable. Standard German ordnance, standard fuse assembly. There was nothing unusual about it, except for one small detail that made Hartley's blood run cold. The fuse pocket was open. Someone had already been inside this bomb. Hartley knelt beside the weapon, his torch beam playing across the fuse well. The threads were clean, recently turned. No corrosion, no impact damage. The fuse itself had been removed with precision, not blown out by malfunction. He reached into his kit for the stethoscope they used to listen for clockwork delays. He pressed it against the cold metal casing and held his breath. Silence. No ticking. No mechanism at all. "Sir," whispered Corporal Davies, his voice tight with fear. "That's not possible. Every Hermann carries either an impact or a delay fuse, sometimes both. But this—" "I know," Hartley cut him off. His mind raced through the possibilities. A dud was one thing. A partially armed bomb was another. But a bomb that had been deliberately opened, its fuse removed, and then dropped anyway? That made no sense. Unless someone wanted it to be found. Unless someone wanted them to look inside. He ran his fingers along the casing, searching for secondary fuse ports, booby traps, anything that might explain this. The metal was smooth, unmarked except for the factory stamps near the nose cone. He recognized the codes. Manufactured at the Rüsselsheim Works, January 1944. Less than 3 months old. Hartley made his decision. Clear the building. 300-meter perimeter. No arguments. It took 40 minutes to evacuate the workers and cordon off the street. 40 minutes of Hartley alone in that basement, sitting beside a bomb that should have killed him, but hadn't. He thought about his wife, Margaret, and their daughter, Emily, who had just turned 3. He thought about the letter in his breast pocket, the one he wrote before every job and never sent. He thought about all the men he'd seen die doing exactly what he was about to do. The bomb casing was held together by 8 large bolts, each requiring a specific torque to remove without triggering anti-handling devices. Hartley worked slowly, methodically, his hands steadier now that he'd committed to the course. First bolt, second bolt, third. Each one came free with a metallic sigh that seemed too loud in the confined space. When the 8th bolt turned, something inside the bomb shifted, a soft metallic scrape, like a drawer being opened. Hartley froze. His heart hammered against his ribs. He waited for the flash, the sound, the end. But nothing came. He lifted the casing plate carefully, his torch illuminating the interior of the bomb. What he saw made absolutely no sense. Where there should have been tightly packed explosive, where there should have been Amatol or TNT or Torpex, there was something else entirely, something that would change everything they thought they knew about the war. Inside the bomb casing, carefully wrapped in oilcloth and secured with wire, were documents, dozens of them. Technical drawings, mathematical equations, schematics for devices Hartley didn't recognize, and photographs. Photographs of factories, of test sites, of scientists standing beside massive machinery that looked like something from a fever dream. At the very top, written in English in neat, precise handwriting on a slip of paper, was a single sentence. They must not build the weapon. The world will not survive it. Hartley's hands began to shake again, but this time it wasn't fear. It was something else, something darker. He reached for the documents, his fingers trembling as he unfolded the first schematic. The diagram showed a bomb unlike anything he'd ever seen. Not explosive, not incendiary, something else. Something that used words like uranium-235 and critical mass and chain reaction. Behind him, footsteps echoed on the basement stairs. "Sir, He stopped mid-sentence. He'd seen what Hartley was holding. "Get Colonel Ashford. And Davies, not a word to anyone. Not anyone. Do you understand?" Davies nodded and disappeared up the stairs. Hartley turned back to the documents, his eyes scanning page after page of technical data, each one more terrifying than the last. Someone inside Nazi Germany was trying to warn them. Someone had risked everything to get this information out. Someone who knew exactly what Hitler's scientists were building in secret facilities scattered across occupied Europe. And someone who believed that if they succeeded, the war wouldn't end with surrender. It would end with the annihilation of entire cities in single, blinding moments of fire and radiation. Hartley sat back on his heels, the documents spread across his lap. The bomb that wouldn't explode had delivered something far more dangerous than high explosive. It had delivered knowledge, and with that knowledge came a terrible burden. Because now they knew what was coming. Now they had to find it before it was too late. But there was one more thing that made Hartley's blood cold. At the bottom of the stack of documents, beneath the technical drawings and the photographs, was a map. A map of Germany with 4 locations marked in red ink. 3 of them were labeled with facility codes and dates. The 4th location, circled multiple times, had just 2 words written beside it. Test successful. The date next to those words was March 5th, 1944. 7 days ago.
March 13th, 1944. Bletchley Park, Buckinghamshire. They came for Hartley at dawn. 2 men in civilian clothes drove him through countryside checkpoints to a Victorian mansion that officially didn't exist. Bletchley Park, Station X, the heart of Britain's code-breaking operations. Colonel Ashford was waiting in a windowless room. Around the conference table sat scientists whose faces Hartley recognized from newspapers. At the head sat a woman whose presence commanded immediate respect. "Lieutenant Hartley," Ashford said. "Dr. Catherine Wells. She's our consultant on German scientific programs." Dr. Wells pushed a folder across the table. "Tell me exactly what you found, every detail." For an hour, Hartley recounted the discovery. When he finished, silence filled the room. Finally, Professor Keller spoke. "If these documents are accurate, if the Germans have achieved sustained fission, we're talking about something that makes our largest bombs look like firecrackers." "How large?" Ashford asked. "A single bomb could destroy all of London," Dr. Wells said quietly. "Westminster to Whitechapel, gone in an instant." The room went still. "The Americans have Manhattan Project," another scientist offered, "but they're years from success." "Then the Germans are ahead," Dr. Wells said, "and operational." Ashford leaned forward. "Is this information legitimate? Could it be disinformation?" Dr. Wells pulled out the technical drawings.
I've reviewed these with our physics team. The mathematics are brilliant. These specifications are real. So we have a German scientist feeding us information. Why? Whoever sent this doesn't want Hitler to have this weapon, Dr. Wells replied. Hartley cleared his throat. Sir, there was something else. He pulled a folded paper from his pocket. A letter, in German. Dr. Wells read aloud. I am Dr. Heinrich Adler. I work at Facility 7 in the Harz Mountains, where we have committed sins against God and nature. We believed we were building a weapon to end the war. Instead, we have built something that will end the world. 3 days ago, we achieved criticality. 32 men died from radiation. Their bodies melted from the inside out over 3 hours. The Führer demands operational devices by June. You must destroy what we have built before it destroys us all. No one spoke. June, Ashford said finally. 3 months. We need verification, Ashford decided. Aerial reconnaissance of the marked locations. If these facilities exist, we bomb them into dust. Dr. Wells stood abruptly. There's one more problem. The location marked Test Successful isn't in Germany. She walked to a wall map. It's here, near Auschwitz. Auschwitz. Hartley had heard whispered stories about Auschwitz. Labor camps, the Germans claimed. But intelligence knew better. Why there? Keller asked. Dr. Wells turned, her face pale. Because they needed test subjects. They needed to measure radiation effects on human beings. At Auschwitz, they have an unlimited supply of people the Reich considers expendable. The silence that followed was different. Not uncertainty or fear. Rage barely contained. How many people are in that camp? Ashford asked. At least 50,000, Dr. Wells replied. Hartley felt sick. This wasn't just war. This was the cold application of science to mass murder on a scale that defied comprehension. We need eyes on all locations within 24 hours. Every hour we wait is an hour closer to June. After the meeting, Dr. Wells remained, studying the map. Hartley approached carefully. Dr. Wells, do you think we can stop this? She turned to face him. Dr. Adler risked everything to give us this information. He believed we could stop it. The question is whether we'll do what's necessary. She picked up a photograph showing scientists in white coats standing before a massive concrete building. Dr. Adler is somewhere in this photograph. One of these men chose conscience over loyalty. But when we find these facilities, we won't be able to distinguish between men like Dr. Adler and men who want Hitler's weapon to succeed. We'll have to kill them all, and live with that. We need to find him, Hartley said. Get him out. Dr. Wells shook her head. By the time we mount an operation, Dr. Adler will likely be dead. The Germans will be looking for whoever leaked this. Hartley thought about a man who'd sacrificed everything to send a warning. About dying alone in an interrogation cell because you'd tried to do the right thing. Then we make sure it wasn't for nothing, he said. Dr. Wells smiled for the first time. A sad, tired smile, but genuine. Yes, Lieutenant, we make sure it wasn't for nothing.
March 17th, 1944. Over Germany, 23,000 feet. Flight Lieutenant Thomas Crawford pushed his de Havilland Mosquito FB Mk6 into a shallow dive. Beside him, Navigator Officer Peter Quinn compared landmarks against the map. Below them, hidden in the snow-covered Harz Mountains, was Facility 7, if it existed. They'd photographed 3 locations over 4 days. The first 2 matched Dr. Adler's description, massive underground complexes with heavy defenses. The third was abandoned, stripped clean. But this 4th location remained invisible. 3 passes, nothing but forest and snow. One more pass, Crawford said, then we head home. Crawford banked left. Morning sun broke through clouds, casting long shadows across mountains. Something caught Crawford's eye, a geometric pattern too uniform to be natural. "Peter, look at this." Quinn pressed his face against the canopy. Then he saw it. The shadow was wrong, a straight edge where nature should be irregular. "That's a building, built right into the mountain." Crawford dropped lower. The facility emerged like a ghost, enormous. The entrance alone was 50 meters wide, sealed by steel doors painted to match rock, ventilation shafts disguised as fissures, guard towers hidden among trees. Quinn's camera chattered. "This is twice the size of the others, their primary installation." Crawford descended to 1,000 feet, then Quinn saw the crater. Half a mile from the entrance, in a cleared section of forest, a massive crater spread 200 meters across, perfectly circular. The earth around it fused into glass, gleaming in sunlight. And the trees for a quarter mile in every direction were simply gone. Not blown down, not burned, vaporized. "That's where they tested it," Quinn whispered. Crawford stared at the crater. He'd seen conventional bombing damage, photographed Berlin after 1,000 bomber raids, but this was different. Surgical precision on a catastrophic scale. One weapon, complete annihilation. "Get every angle," Crawford said grimly. Quinn kept shooting as Crawford circled. The crater, the facility, the defensive positions. Everything that would determine whether the mission to destroy this place would succeed. Then the anti-aircraft guns opened fire. Black puffs of flak bloomed around them. Crawford banked hard right, climbing. More flak burst behind them, gunners finding their range. "They're tracking us," Quinn shouted. Crawford dove toward the tree line, using terrain to break line of sight. Then Quinn saw them. Focke-Wulfs, 9 o'clock high, 2 of them. 2 FW-19s diving out of the sun, perfectly positioned for intercept. The German pilots had been waiting. "Jettison the cameras, everything," Crawford ordered. "But the photographs. Film is in the magazine. Throw the rest." Quinn pushed the cameras out. The Mosquito jumped. Crawford pushed throttles to maximum power, the twin Rolls-Royce Merlin engines surging. The race was on. The Mosquito was fast, but the Focke-Wulfs were faster in a dive. Tracer rounds streaked past the cockpit. Crawford jinked left, then right, making himself unpredictable. Quinn clutched the film magazines to his chest, protecting them with his body. They cleared the mountains. Open sky ahead. Crawford kept the Mosquito low, using every valley, every hill for cover. The German fighters stayed with them, closing the distance meter by meter. Then Crawford saw the cloud bank, thick, dark, stretching across their path like salvation. He aimed for it, pushing the Mosquito to its limit. The fighters fired again. Something struck the tail. The aircraft shuddered but held together. They plunged into the clouds. Instant blindness. Crawford flew by instruments alone, trusting his training. Seconds stretched into eternity. Then they burst through the other side. Empty sky. The fighters were gone, lost in the clouds or unwilling to chase deeper into Allied territory. Quinn exhaled slowly. "We made it." Crawford nodded, hands trembling on the controls. "And we got what we came for." March 19th, 1944. RAF Benson, Oxfordshire. Hartley stood in the darkroom watching the photographs develop. One by one, they emerged from the chemical bath. The facility, the crater, the fused glass. Proof that Dr. Adler had told the truth. Proof that Hitler was building the end of the world. Colonel Ashford studied each photograph in silence. Finally, he spoke. "Bomber Command is planning the mission. 300 aircraft, Lancasters, Halifaxes, everything we can put in the air. We hit all remaining facilities simultaneously, give them no warning, no chance to evacuate." "When?" Hartley asked. "March 28th, 9 days." Dr. Wells joined them, her face grave. 9 days for Dr. Adler to survive. 9 days for the Germans to move their research. 9 days for everything to go wrong. Hartley picked up the photograph of the crater, the evidence of what one atomic weapon could do. He thought about London, about Margaret and Emily,
about every city in England facing this horror if they failed. "We'll stop them," he said. Ashford met his eyes. "We'd better, because if we don't, if even one of these weapons becomes operational, the war ends. Just not the way anyone imagined." The room fell silent. Outside, bombers were being fueled, crews briefed, ordnance loaded. The largest raid of the war was being prepared in secret. Hundreds of men who didn't know what they were really bombing. Hundreds of men who would never know they'd saved the world. Hartley looked at the photographs one last time. Somewhere in that facility was Dr. Adler, if he was still alive. A man who'd betrayed his country to save humanity. A man who would likely die in the bombing raid launched because of his own warning. "We make sure it wasn't for nothing," Hartley said quietly. Dr. Wells nodded. "Yes, we make sure it wasn't for nothing." In 9 days, the bombers would fly. In 9 days, Facility 7 and its secrets would be turned to dust. In 9 days, the world would continue spinning, unaware of how close it had come to annihilation. All because one man had the courage to put a message in a bomb that wouldn't explode. All because one man chose conscience over country. All because one man believed that some secrets were too dangerous to keep, even for the enemy. The photographs went into a classified folder marked Operation Ghost Protocol. The folder was sealed, stamped Top Secret, and locked in a vault where it would remain for 50 years. But the mission would fly, the facilities would burn, and the weapon that could have ended the world would die in its cradle, destroyed by the very nation it was meant to destroy. Dr. Adler's sacrifice would never be remembered. His name would never be known. But his warning had been heard. And that, in the end, was enough.